conservative,
Christian, mother, wife,
Air Force veteran.
gun rights advocate.
This is Stacy on the Right. Here's your host, Stacy Washington.
Some hosts over the break might, I don't know what they do, maybe text their family members. I'm sending recipes to my producer. Sometimes we make the same things, and then we're like, was that good to you? Anyway, welcome back to Stacy on the Right. Welcoming into the show, Brandon Arnold, Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Thank you so much, Brandon, for coming back on.
Thank you for having me, Stacy.
All right. So I don't know. I keep getting told by Karine Jean-Pierre and President Biden that financially everything's fine. Everything's just fine. But I keep going to the grocery store and I'm so angry when I leave there. It's a real problem. Like my husband has taken to going. Our older daughter, she's been going. Like everyone's trying to basically spare me from the anger fest that I am after I go to the grocery store. That's what's being called Bidenomics. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable that they keep trying to put a lipstick on a pig here and tell us that Bidenomics is working because the rate of inflation is starting to fall. That's good news. I don't mean to undermine the fact that we're moving in the right direction slowly, but surely. But things are still getting more expensive. Inflation is still a problem. They don't get that because the rate of inflation, because things are getting more expensive at a slower rate, they're spiking the football and celebrating. But meanwhile, everyday American families are out there, just as you are, Stacy, getting enraged when they see ridiculous prices for eggs, meat, all sorts of grocery products. When they go to the gas station, and gas is significantly more expensive than it was when Joe Biden took office. Prices are up more than 17% across the board. So, yeah, things are getting a little bit better. We're getting killed at the grocery store a little more slowly, but it's still ridiculous the amount of money that we have to spend relative to what we had to spend just a couple of years ago to do virtually anything.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that because, the leftists will say, oh, it's a right-wing talking point. She's just saying that because she's a right-winger. She can afford to buy what she wants. Well, I can't afford to buy anything I want, but I can afford to go to the grocery store. But what I'm finding is I need to cut back on other things in order to kind of stick within the same spending pattern. And I think that's where people get a little bit of a slow boil. It's not that they can't afford to go to the grocery store, although there are families that are truly struggling, and I don't want to leave them out of the conversation. But for middle-class Americans, it's a matter of deciding, okay, well, there's nothing being put out by Hollywood that's worth going to the movies for. Thank God, because I'm spending all that money that I used to spend going to the movies. I'm spending that at the grocery store. I'm literally leaving it all there instead of spending it at a bunch of different places on entertainment and clothes and stuff like that. I'm buying less of all that stuff and just focusing on basics.
Yeah, I mean, people are making sacrifices. They're making trade-offs all the time. I don't think the Biden administration is really aware of that. So instead of, buying a new vehicle because your car is starting to become dilapidated and run into all sorts of problems, you can't afford to make that purchase. So you have to grin and bear it. Or, you want to take a fancy vacation this summer, you can't afford to do it. Maybe you do a staycation or something more modest. All sorts of those trade-offs are taking place, and people aren't happy about that. They want to go back to the way things were a couple of years ago when their dollars stretched a little further, when they were able to make those purchases when they wanted to, not just when they had to. And the other phenomenon that we're seeing when people can't make those trade-offs, we're seeing people put more and more money on their credit cards. So we have over $1 trillion right now, over $1 trillion in collective credit card debt. It's the highest in our nation's history, and it continues to skyrocket. And to me, that means that Americans are out there struggling. They're trying to do their best to keep their heads above water in this economy, but they're having to rely on credit cards. And at a time when the Fed has raised interest rates repeatedly, fortunately, they just took their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. But when they continue to raise interest rates month in and month out, those minimum payments are being tougher and tougher for people to pay off. And people are falling behind. They're starting to default on their credit cards. And that's going to spell real disaster for them for a variety of reasons. As you know, the inability to buy a home, a car, what have you. It's a real problem out there.
Yeah, no, it is. And I've noticed some of the prices have come down, like used cars. The prices for used cars have come down just a little bit. So and obviously they were at all-time record highs, right? Inventory has been an issue because of the hurricane and other natural disasters. So, and of course, they're just now recovering over the chip shortage. So there's been a lot of things that have played a role here. But the problem that I have is that instead of just saying, look, the economy is suffering because we're still pumping money into the economy and forgiving student loans and all kinds of things that they're doing to try to buy their voters. And those infusions of cash spur more inflation. So even though inflation has slowed, the inflation that we've already experienced, that's still there. Like it's not like it's been rolled back. Slowing the growth of inflation doesn't actually help with all the inflation we're already living under. And that's the acknowledgement that we're not getting from this White House.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. This White House does not understand the difference between a slower rate of inflation and deflation, where prices are actually falling. And like you said, in certain categories, we are seeing prices fall, but not enough categories. Used cars, they've fallen a little bit. Some consumer goods, we've started to see price reductions, televisions, smartphones. That's all good news, but we're miles and miles away from where we need to be. So they're spiking the football. They've barely got the ball, off their own 20-yard line here. They got a long way to go. And in this new thing that they're trying, I don't know if you saw this, they yesterday announced this supply chain project, all of these new policies that are really warmed over old policies, the creation of a council on supply chain resilience, which to me sounds a lot very, very similar to the supply chain disruptions task force that they started a couple of years ago. It's just warmed over, recycled, bad policies where they think that bureaucrats and government officials can employ a top-down approach to make things function the way they want to. It just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. But what is the impending impact? Like, will voters ignore what they're experiencing in their pocketbooks and in their everyday, kind of calculations for how they want to live, or will voters, kind of go with the du jour, the issue du jour, which is, screaming and crying about abortions, like everybody in America is having an abortion or in need of an abortion right now? That's the question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think all of the polling data that we've seen suggests that Bidenomics isn't winning anybody over. It's not convincing anyone that they ought to support Biden in any way, shape, or form right now. And, that's not just Republicans, that's independents, that's even a lot of Democrats. They're not buying it. So what Biden needs to do is an all-out course correction. And I'm skeptical that such a thing would happen. But I think there are some bipartisan opportunities to make things a little bit better. We talk about a fiscal commission. There's bipartisan support for that on Capitol Hill. It's not an end-all, be-all by any stretch of the imagination, but at least for this administration and for some of his allies in Congress to acknowledge that we have this enormous debt problem, these trillion-dollar-plus deficits each and every year as far as the eye can see, the need to address those. I think he needs to be honest about that. Instead, he's pretending AOC-style monetary theory where we can just spend and spend and spend without any repercussions. Maybe that worked in the 60s, but it certainly is not working today. It's one of the contributing factors that we've seen to rising inflation, and it's one of the reasons why it's hard to be optimistic about this burden that we're heaping onto our children and grandchildren and future generations that they are going to have to pay off in the form of higher taxes or maybe just a disastrously bad economy.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much to this that we're experiencing, right? That it feels momentous, but it also feels unreal. Like, when I'm at the store and I see these outrageous prices, it doesn't feel real. It feels like any second, someone should jump out and go, that's a joke. That's not the real price or something. There's a kind of funhouse torture kind of a thing going on here. It's just something that I couldn't possibly. I guess I knew that Biden as a president would be bad. I didn't think he would be this bad.
Yeah. I mean, I knew he'd have bad policies, but I thought he'd be a little bit more in touch with working class Americans. I think that's the biggest surprise for me. We knew he was going to spend money left and right, raise taxes, to union policies, when it comes to environmental policies. We knew that. But when you see your policies are failing, and not just failing, his core stakeholders or whatever, but failing everyday working class Americans. He claims to be Union Joe, middle class Joe, a man of the people. But if you look at the polling numbers, you look at the economic data, those are oftentimes the people that are being hit hardest by his policies and are least happy with what he's doing. It's just an amazing disconnect with what ought to be his core constituency, which ought to be, Biden voters in theory, but they're walking away from him because they're seeing that his policies are broken. And instead of looking at a course correction, instead of looking at any kind of modification, it's just doubling down. He's talking more about EVs and wind turbines in this supply chain plan. I just don't understand how that is resonating. A $60,000 EV is not helping that mom who's making $45,000 a year, struggling to fill up that tank with gasoline. This is a Marie Antoinette let them eat cake moment. They can't afford that car, even with your tax subsidy. They need to afford that $30, $40, $50 to fill up the tank of gas, and that's taking a real bite out of their day-to-day living.
Yeah, it is. It's doing something that I think people who are really, really interested in like the betterment of anyone else in this country, you have to consider that while you may be doing perfectly fine, you know things might be going darn well for you, so many Americans are struggling. Like it's the struggle is real, and so those people are deeply interested in having an opportunity to just to make it right. They just want to make it, and this isn't working. It's just not. It's not working. The Bidenomics, no matter how much they keep telling us it's working, it isn't.
Yeah. It's such, you think of past Democratic presidents, and, Bill Clinton comes to mind here. I didn't agree with all of his policies by any stretch of the imagination, but the narrative that he put out there, the I feel your pain narrative, really spoke to a lot of people that were struggling. And some of his policies were actually, he achieved a balanced budget, which is something no president since has done. So while I wasn't a fan of a lot of his policies, he was really, really effective at connecting with average Americans and with selling his agenda as one that helped everybody, and that's such a, the Democratic Party has just changed so dramatically over those roughly 30 years since he was president. And now it's so dominated by, the radical interest groups like environmental groups, union groups, and so forth. And it's moved away from everyday American politics, from connecting with voters, from trying for better or for worse to enact government policies to help these folks. And I'm a limited government guy. I'm very skeptical of those programs to start with, but at least they were coming from a good place there. Joe Biden seems so disconnected from that general philosophy right now, and I think that's why his poll numbers are just completely in the toilet.
Yep. Completely, unbelievably, like it's unacceptable. People are exhausted by the idea that they have to continue to put up with Joe Biden and his policies. And so next year is the opportunity to kind of make a change. And the hope, I know many people have to be hoping sincerely that they're going to get an opportunity to have a new president, someone who knows a little bit about economics.
That would be nice. I think it's ridiculous. If I was a Democrat, I would just be screaming from the rooftops that it's time for a change at the top, that Joe Biden's had his chance, hasn't succeeded, and if they wanted to win next year, that they need to find a stronger candidate, somebody that can speak to everyday people, somebody that's putting out a vision for America that's different than this failed vision. I'm just absolutely stunned every day that they haven't had that conversation at the Democratic National Committee and those people around Biden haven't told him, listen, go to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. It's lovely. Spend time with your family. Go fishing. Do what you like to do. Enjoy retirement. You're 80 years old. I can't believe people haven't told him that, and that they haven't started looking for somebody who is more competitive. I'm not trying to give them any political advice here. It's just surprising to me that conversation has not taken place. And I think Republicans stand to benefit greatly as long as it doesn't.
Yep, they stand to benefit greatly if they don't toss it and, toss it into the dustbin of losses that should have been wins. Republicans have been known to do that. Biden is offering 2024 up on a silver platter. If Republicans can keep the focus on the economy and on the issues that matter to Americans most and stop talking about abortion, and I'm saying that as a pro-life American, I believe in the pro-life cause with every fiber of my being, but I also think, when a person is hungry, you don't come to them and talk about decorating or landscaping. You talk to them about what they can have to eat. Americans are hungry. They don't need to hear about abortion policy. They need to hear about what a Republican president would do to make it easier for them to eat and keep their house warm or cool and put gas in their car. That's what they need.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's some hardcore people on the pro-life, pro-choice side that are going to vote based on that issue alone. But I think most people are focused, as you said, on the economy right now. Inflation in particular is dominating all of those polls when it comes to concerns for Americans right now. People are really worried that the end of inflation is, years in the future. And we need somebody to come forward and not just tell folks that they can be optimistic, that they can feel positively about this economy, but to actually offer up a vision and better tax policy, better trade policy, more fiscal responsibility when it comes to spending. Put forward a vision here that makes people enthusiastic about being an American, about the future of this country. I'm just not seeing that really from any candidate to a sufficient extent. I think people are afraid to put forth a budget for America, better tax policy that encourages companies to invest in this nation, to create jobs, to grow the economy, and so forth. People are afraid to talk about that. People are afraid to talk about our budget, just absolute disaster that we're dealing with right now. Like I said earlier, trillion-dollar deficits have become the norm, and we've become desensitized to the fact that is completely irresponsible, completely unfair to future generations, and, by the way, helping to drive up inflation. People need to put forward a vision to tell the American people what they're going to do to make things better. I'd really like to see that from Republican candidates across the board, Congress, the White House, governors, you name it. Everyone needs to be speaking in clear terms that really resonate with the American public, that really show that they are the adults in the room that are going to solve these problems.
Yep, absolutely. The adults in the room that are going to solve these problems. I'm so grateful for your time tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you here, especially the work that you're doing at your organization, which is the National Taxpayers Union. The website is NTU.org, NTU.org. Brandon Arnold, thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure, Stacy. Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening. 866-957-2874, 866-957-2874 to join me. We'll be right back.